What's up, everyone? I am James Bork, co-founder and CEO of Into. I am joined here today with Mr. Tomek Duda from Aspect. Tomek, how you doing today?
I'm doing real good in Lisbon for the week. The capital of
Hey,
crypto of Europe, from what I hear.
that's what you've heard. It's not the truth. It used to be. Ooh, fighting words. We were having an interesting conversation outside of this recording and then decided to jump on and just record something very quickly on it. I'm excited to delve into this topic a little bit. Recently, I think top of mind, identity has come up several times. It was a major topic at DevConnect in Istanbul. It's something that we have been talking about internally for a very long time and something that we've been discussing from a messaging standpoint as well. I guess just back to the basics, the question would be, why is identity so important in Web3?
Yeah, I think it's a very big question, and nobody's really answered it to get to the bottom of the matter. And it's really good to have the conversation going just to be able to get more opinions, more smart people to say what they think is going to be the future of identity in Web3 and how we're going to get there when it comes to, well, user experience. And also how are we going to be able to supply the right kind of infrastructure that's going to be able to help us build it, keep it, maintain it, and make it.
So I'm going to lean on you for the sake of this conversation a little bit to be our everyman.
That's not very far from the truth.
No, but it's as someone who professionally dedicates themselves to communicating with people and to communicating with people effectively, I do think that it's useful to get that perspective. Just to start off, let's establish a baseline definition of what identity is. As our everyman today, what does identity mean to you?
It means my passport, my ID, my driver's license, some document with a photograph that's going to be able to confirm to whether that's a policeman, whether that's a government official, that I am who I am. And it's something that I carry on me or I have it in my phone.
It's really interesting that I think from a personal standpoint, you said, I am who I am, but you just listed off a bunch of forms of identification that were provided to you and can be revoked and need to be renewed on a regular basis.
A piece of plastic is not going to be able to put my soul and be able to really show who I am. That's a bit too complex, but maybe we can put it on the blockchain one day. And the piece of plastic is the proof of who I am. It isn't who I am in the end.
So let's take your passport maybe as a starting point. I'm assuming you have a Polish passport, right? Which means that you are part of the European Union, which means that you can travel relatively freely throughout the world.
Almost everywhere, really.
Yep.
Everybody likes the EU people.
It's not to be taken for granted, right? That has a lot to do with who the European Union is and the authority with which they issue their passports. Needless to say, not all passports are recognized, and not all passports are recognized by other countries. There is this important, when you're talking about identity in your case, like what you're talking about, your passport, your ID, it's not just about capturing who you are, but it's about people recognizing that this document is valid and allowing it to identify you to them, even though it might be outside of their systems or it would be outside of their ability to independently verify. When I first came to Europe, I brought my dog. The dog had a passport, and it turns out that the passport was, first off, it was issued by the European Union, but there is no means of authenticating the dog's passport. It's handwritten. The photo is glued. There's a bunch of medical records that are handwritten in it, and it's not something that can actually be verified. So I could very easily just say that my 8-pound Chihuahua is now get a pencil, erase it, and it's now a 30-pound Rottweiler lab or something, right? Verification is important and recognition is important. So there's two sides to that coin. And I think this maybe gets us closer to one of the major whys of Web3. So just leaning on a kind of a pretty common framework, one that was recently, I think, very elegantly summarized by Andreessen Horowitz. If the era of Web 1 was the read era and Web 2 was the era of publication, Web 3 stands to be the era of ownership. So as an everyman, does that mean anything to you?
Everyman on the internet? Yeah, it somehow does because, well, the document from A16Z so that everybody can see it. What it means to me is that, yeah, I couldn't really interact with Web 1 because it was very simple. It was, so to speak, ears and bones and the internet HTML, really. Two was kind of, you can finally be able to do stuff, message people, and I call it the Facebook era for myself because I was finally able to upload things, interact with people. Yep. I got the messenger going, I got the ability to post. And as the everyday man, that was a breakthrough because it was no longer just reading Wikipedia and being able to check the news. And now going towards the Web3, where I'm educating myself every week, understanding what is really happening more and more, I have become aware of the fact that it's just be able to take the right of how the internet works into the communities that govern it instead of the companies that govern it. That's just my biggest takeaway of the ownership versus being able to rely on the big boys.
Okay. So I'm going to correct you a little bit. Wikipedia was actually Web 2.
Because the editors were able to input. That's right. Well, it's Web 1 version for me because I was a little boy. And whenever I put in an edit into Sahara Desert saying it's very dry there, people removed it. So I didn't feel like it was Web 2 for me.
Web 1 would have been in Carta, but Web 2 was, published. It was people contributing to a community effort. Really a transitionary, the early Web 2. Diving into the ownership piece then, I know you're excited about it. I think we might have touched on this. It doesn't matter to you yet.
Not yet, really, because at the end of the day, I mostly use Web 2. If at all, I use Web 3 on very rare occasions. That's why it doesn't matter to me at this point. But in the long run, I'm actually self-aware of the fact that if something is free on the internet, then it's paid by somebody else. And it's usually the people that handle and use my data for reasons that are beyond me most of the time. Therefore, I am in the fortunate position to say I would prefer to pay for access to those things instead of having my data being used, because I just feel more secure and confident when I'm able to say, okay, I gave you all this data from me, and I don't want anyone to be able to use it against me in any way, or also to be able to, I want to buy shit on the internet, let's face it. I don't want them to target me with those weird ads that I stumbled upon the website of, and they've been tracking me because of the cookies and all. I don't want all that power to be in the people that are evil at the end of the day, because those corporations are all about profit, and you see all those issues that they have with the government. Just another fine, another day. Who cares? They've got billions and more.
I highlight the paradox of the man who doesn't have a credit card is willing to pay for his internet browsing.
Yes. I've been thinking about using Brave. Actually.
Comes to ownership, and this is things. Historical perspective. Web 1 came around when the commercial internet was introduced, and it was no longer just a hobby. There were initiative from the browsers, from Microsoft, from Netscape, to partner with payment systems, with Visa, with MasterCard. The response at that time was, internet holds no commercial future. We are not going to go out of our way to build out payment rails that are native to the internet. Dream, I think, of the early Web 1 was to have payments built in directly, right? If I'm publishing information, I should be able to capture value for what I've created that is native to the medium. So obviously didn't happen. And what ended up happening was we effectively took the fax machine, we took, over the phone credit card payments, and we built out a bridge between what was already existing and what the internet was. By the time we get to Web 2, credit card payments online were incredibly sophisticated, right? You have things Stripe that are offering payments as an API. They still are very expensive, right? You can't set up a Shopify store without losing 30% to either Shopify or the credit card payment companies. And so Web 3, right, when you talk about ownership and we're talking about monetizing data, outside of taking subscriptions and taking credit card payments, the options were effectively advertising, which led to these incredibly sophisticated cookie tracking marketing initiatives, right? How can we squeeze more return on the money that you're spending on advertising? I would pose the argument, and I think very few in Web3 would kind of pick me on this, that we got to where we are with data privacy going out the window because there was no native method of capturing value online. Evolved, though, and more people are publishing to this point where we want to own things, where we actually see value in it. Also been this very profound movement where in the 90s, being online was a privilege, right? Online in 1993. I have friends that are my age that weren't online until 1998, 1999. Some don't remember the Y2K bug, right? It was a luxury, right? Online banking was a privilege I mean, banking in general is a privilege. Online banking was a privilege. Now I can't do anything without my bank's mobile app. I can't buy McDonald's without my thumbprint. Crazy, right? So now it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And therefore it needs to be equitably accessible to people, which brings us back to ownership. To realign incentives, we're trying to capture value. Two part of it, I'd love to get your reaction to this, is before you get to identity, you need to have control over how the network itself, the technology itself identifies you, how you connect to it, right? In Web 2, this would be the equivalent of like your IP address. The reason you get funny advertisements when you visit a friend's house is because you're inheriting their data, because the public facing address is whatever their modem is connected to. In Web 3, we have the ability to, one, create our own addresses independent of any third parties. It's really more about, please don't take it away, right? It's less, hey, Mr. Government, I like my passport. Please renew it for me in a timely fashion. Hey, Mr. Government, I like driving. Please don't revoke my driver's license. In Web3, the reaction was the opposite. And it was, instead of please don't take it away, it's come and take it. Do your best, right? And that's where self-sovereignty and agency really comes in. Into even before you get to identity and credentials and verifiability and recognition from third parties, it's about empowering individuals to maintain a public-facing address, a face that then they can start building identity with. They can start associating their content, their value, their creation, their personality, their whatever with. Hopefully, through more sophisticated decentralized identifiers and verified credentials, we can get to a point where we can pick and choose how much data we share when we're identifying to, in your case, communities, right? You said communities are very important. I know that was maybe a little bit of a diatribe on identity and ownership in a history course, which is typically how I do things. But world that you want to live in, do you want that responsibility to issue your own identity and control it and hope that other people recognize it? Is that useful to the everyman?
I think I would trust myself with that. Responsible enough, and not to mention millions of other people being like, yeah, I can do it, and them being less responsible than me, potentially. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm a very responsible or irresponsible person, but I think it's up to handle. And no, it's too much.
Okay. Follow-up question. Like to be able to choose who you trust with your ownership.
Well, it's voting, so I know who I trust to take care of the future of wherever I live. I am trusting a bank. I am trusting a company that I use their computer, or I set up an account with and I share my data. So that I can do, as long as they're able to provide me with the reassurances that what I share and what I do is going to keep me safe.
Arguments could be made that voting doesn't necessarily involve choice. A bank does, right? If it's a free and open market, you should have several choices of, who your financial institutions are. Not that they make it easy to leave. I don't know if you've tried to close a bank account ever, but it's a difficult and laborious process. They don't like it.
A Facebook account or a bank account?
The bank account, because they still charge you money for it.
They have the right to be forgotten, so they can erase all this stuff. So there's no way to trace you back to.
To be forgotten, but you don't have the right to demonstrate or prove that you've been forgotten. Here's verifiability again. My leading question here then was, right, do you want the choice? And so if we're talking about like the core features that we want to deliver within two, it's one, the ability to create your own account, right, to do independently of third parties, to do so using your own resources, using your own machine, your own phone, your own desktop. One, right, to create your own. It's self-sovereign. Secondly, it's interoperability. Right? It should be able to work with multiple networks. It should be able to work with multiple platforms, right? It should be able to go everywhere that I go. And third, and most importantly almost, is the ability to choose how I use it. First two, I think, normal, traditional addressing in Web3, externally owned accounts, or even to some degree smart contract wallets, they've achieved a lot of this, right? You create your own, you deploy your own. And then secondly, for the most part, compatibility and interoperability was, top of mind. The choice thing is where we've really fallen short. With an EOA, you don't have a choice, right? It's one password and you have to save that password for the rest of your life and you can never change it. And on the flip side, with either network custody or smart contract custody, right, it's very hard to leave. You are subject to their whims, and a lot of times they even include code that allows them to revoke access to you, right? Like they can actually revoke NFTs and stuff. Gross oversimplification. So with Into, we are trying to really empower all three of those. They have Tomek choose who he trusts and who he doesn't, and then most importantly, be able to revoke that trust when he no longer wants to trust those people. Hopefully that is something that is useful to you.
Well, the forgotten password button, I've used it a million times. To do a forgotten password on, I don't know, all my savings or my identity, and it wouldn't be available because, as far as I'm concerned, that's the state of things in Web3 right now. I'd be quite devastated. And if I weren't able to move over to a different bank just because this one has low rates and I want higher rates or a better loan, a big bummer, and I would basically have to create a completely new account there and be like, you know what, I spent so much time and effort on this one, I don't want to leave, but I'm forced to.
Those are always better.
Competing against other networks, if they're being able to give us features as users that aren't available with other providers, then that's what brings innovation and progress.
I won't disagree. Thank you so much for joining today. It's as always a pleasure speaking with you, and look forward to continuing these conversations and figuring out how to the best communicate these, sometimes complex ideas, but hopefully impactful. That's the challenge, is translating the vision that we have into technology that works so that you can actually do what we think you want to do, if that makes sense. James Bork with Into, thank you so much. And Tomek, a little goodbye. Any closing comments from you?
I feel like this is definitely helping the everyday man because, well, while I'm learning, I'm hoping somebody else is learning as well. And that just creates a bigger market for whatever Web3 is able to offer from now on and in the future. And exactly what we need, higher ability to comprehend what's really happening, why it's happening, and how can I get in it.
All right. Tomek Duda with Aspect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you guys soon.